you love all things football? Hey, NFL fans, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Weekly Gridiron Podcast. It's got everything you need: debates, current NFL events and news, and taking your questions with your host, Lance.
Hey everybody, it's Lance. What's going on? Welcome to the Weekly Gridiron Podcast. This week we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the rules that the NFL adopted. The first one to talk about is introduced by Philadelphia. It prohibits the leap or block attempt on field goal and extra point plays. Final language will be available at a later time. But this rule, I never really saw an issue with that. I know some fans are heard about losing games, whatnot, for field goal blocks, whatnot. I know the Seahawks did it quite a few times. I think 2 or 3 last year alone. But I've never seen anyone actually get hurt. I guess the potential of it's there, that someone could get hurt, just by the fact someone's jumping over right at the snap. So if you're snapping your head up pretty quick, like you normally would, obviously after snapping the ball, you could possibly injure your neck, possibly injure your back. Big guys jumping over, so I guess I can see the possibility of that becoming an issue. I don't think it has, though, at this yet. Maybe it has. If you have seen it happen, go ahead and correct me down at the bottom in the comments and just cite an example, because I don't really ever remember that being an issue. Another one being the competition committee makes permanent that rule that disqualifies a player who's penalized twice in a game for certain types of unsportsmanlike conduct. I guess it really depends on what kind of foul it is, though, because it doesn't really get in specifics. I'm sure there's language somewhere we can look more in depth about it to figure out specifically which unsportsmanlike conduct fouls are talking about and the severity of it. Obviously, is it just a disqualification for that one game, or does that escalate into more if it happens more? So kind of how the NBA is with technical fouls. After you get so many, do you just start getting suspended games? How does that work? Another one that I think is kind of a good idea, it gives a receiver running a pass route defenseless player protection. So I'm not sure if a lot of you guys are aware, but if let's say the ball gets deflected at the line of scrimmage after it's snapped, you can hit essentially the receiver, despite the fact it's not going to go to the receiver or anything that nature. But I've seen some pretty vicious hits on guys that I don't think they're really expecting it, because, they're running the route. They don't know the ball's been deflected. So to have a cornerback or a DB, whoever it may be, come and light you up going across the middle of the field, I can definitely see where an injury, or at least a very minimum a concussion, could come into play on that. Another one was replaces the sideline replay monitor with a handheld device and authorizes designated members of the officiating department to make the final decision in replay reviews. I think that kind of helps a little bit. I never liked the whole sideline review type thing. I think if they get the video evidence, they can send it up to the competition committee, because there's a lot of times the official department disagrees with what's being said on the field. So I think that's probably a good thing, and I think the review can happen a lot sooner, especially since they typically look at just about every single play on review anyways. So I think that'll be a good thing. I know one of the teams had suggested that they can challenge a referee's review, which, sometimes that makes sense, but I don't think they would ever alter their call based on something they've already made. So that one never passed. I know it was submitted, but I don't think it had obviously it didn't have enough votes, but I don't think it was ever a real possibility to begin with. And then another one that I didn't know was an issue until last year. I believe the Niners were the ones who did it. It makes actions to conserve time illegal after the 2-minute warning of either half. And also makes it unsportsmanlike conduct to commit multiple fouls during the same play designed to manipulate the game clock. So I can't remember specifically what game it was, but I do remember they literally have a YouTube video of every single player running a route being held and dragged to the ground to take time off. Yeah, obviously there was flags thrown, but time was still running off during that play, and then there was more ran off afterwards anyway, which that should never have been a case anyway. I didn't know that was an issue, and I don't know if anyone's ever really exploited it until last year. I heard about it a couple of times, so I think that's good. And that's really the only ones that stood out for me as far as the rules go. But I did want to talk a little bit about today's meeting that the Patriots had with Adrian Peterson. So this is a typical Patriots move. It almost seems like a perfect fit and very, very New England like coming from free agency. So it's a big name who doesn't get the interest that they expect, and New England will somehow usually end up with them, and they either solidly contribute or they're huge contributors throughout the season. But they always seem to get these big name guys for super bargain prices. So just a typical move. They haven't made a signing yet. I know they just came in, or they brought him in to do a workout, but I can't even imagine like Adrian Peterson with the Patriots. I mean, they love big backs. For whatever reason, they had LeGarrette Blount last year or the past couple of seasons, so that'd be the replacement. But LeGarrette Blount's still a free agent, so he could still come back to New England, and then you would have an Adrian Peterson, LeGarrette Blount, and then all their other Dion White, I think is his name. Real shifty, quick back, amazing receiving back, probably the unsung hero at the Super Bowl. So just another big name visiting free New England that I fully expect them to probably sign him at a later time. I don't think we'll get an announcement in the next week or so, but I think that's a perfect fit for Adrian Peterson because I know he's competing for a Super Bowl, and New England this offseason alone has been incredible, and as far as acquiring talent via free agency, trades, whatnot, and they already had good talent. I mean, they just came off of a Super Bowl victory, so the stronger getting stronger. The Chiefs specifically, so they signed a tight end named Gavin Escobar, who was the third tight end in Dallas. He's not a really good run blocker, but his hands are incredibly soft. So what does that mean for the Chiefs? I think Demetrius Harris, I know he just had a little run-in with the law. I don't think he was ever charged or convicted of anything, though. But one thing does remain, Harris has some of the worst hands, and he's been a project for the last 4 years anyway, and I think everyone's kind of tired of seeing Demetrius Harris staying in that spot with no real competition so far other than rookies that never seem to last anyway long enough to give him a real push for his job. I think that's what Escobar does. At the very worst, he's the number 3 tight end for Kansas City, and he's a really good route runner with really good hands, which that's 2 pluses that Harris doesn't have. The only downside, though, of course, is he's not a good run blocker, so it's hard to see how it's going to work. I know Kelsey, if anyone remembers, when he first started playing for the Chiefs, he wasn't very good at run blocking either, but now he's probably one of the most complete tight ends, so maybe it's just a little bit of coaching that he needs. He obviously has the size. He's 6'6" with like 260 pounds, 270. He's not overly fast, but he's a plus athlete. Really good hands again. Really good solid route running, which when you got Alex Smith, you got to have good solid route runners because a lot of their stuff's based on timing. So I think he'll, at the very worst, be our number 3 tight end, but I think he could push Harris for that number 2 spot if he can improve his blocking even marginally. So keep an eye on that. I think that's going to be a big training camp battle, and I think he's going to make good plays for us anyway. Some of the more recent news that a lot of people have been excited, I've seen on Twitter, was middle linebacker Rey Mauluga from the Bengals. He was released. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, this would have been more exciting. He was never in a 3-4 in a consistent basis anyway. He's much better suited to be a strong side linebacker in the 4-3. The reason why is because he's definitely a good 1 to 2 down linebacker, but I think KC's just got too many young linebackers who can fill that role, if not like, maybe not to the extent of Mauluga, but they have upside. Like there's a ton of upside on the young guys that they have, and maybe it's just a fundamental thing that makes them better at run blocking, but I just don't see the need for a veteran linebacker. I know they want to replace Derek Johnson, but I mean, he's only going to be out for a few games, and at the very least, let one of those young guns fill in. I think Ramik Wilson did just fine filling in for him. They just need a true thumper on those first couple of downs, which even with the draft, though, I don't think, even if we had interest in Mauluga, I don't think we would sign him until after the draft because there's a ton of talent in the draft, and I think that's probably one of the reasons he hasn't garnered much interest. But I do credit the Chiefs for doing their due diligence, checking out a lot of these guys. One of Dorsey's things is just don't leave a stone unturned. So you never know what you can get. Maybe he will be a good fit, but I do know that the snaps that they graded him, that PFF graded him, when he was in a 3-4 were horrible. He was not good against coverage at all. He never has been. He's just been marginally decent against it. But with his age, he's not getting any better. He's only going to decline more. He's slow. He's very powerful, but that's about the extent of what it is. He's not even a very solid tackler. So I just don't see Kansas City really getting involved with that unless, last year we had a ton of injuries. So that's something that down the road, if he doesn't get signed, that's a possibility. They know what they would be getting out of him. But that's really it for this week's episode. I know it's not a very long episode, but I just wanted to touch on a few bases. Just a couple of updates, though. I will be getting a new website up and running here in the next week or so. It's being worked on. It's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be more click and go directly to the podcast, but more details on that to come out. And then we'll be revamping a few things. I'm trying to get a video together for a promotional video, as well as something to play. You are one of my YouTube subscribers, or if you are just following my YouTube, and that's your version that you'd like to listen to the podcast, have some type of visual, because right now it's just audio. So if you guys have any comments, suggestions, or any topics that you'd like to hear me talk about, just shoot me a message. Go to weeklygridiron.com. I got multiple ways to get access to me, including the email. So shoot me some messages, shoot me some questions, and we'll talk about it on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Weekly Gridiron Podcast, online at weeklygridiron.com with your host, Lance. Catch them on Twitter at weekly_gridiron and their Facebook group, Weekly Gridiron. We'll catch you next time on the Weekly Gridiron Podcast.